show me that you are ready to begin. We're getting started. Alright, hello everyone, my name is Matthew. I'm the program manager for Northwestern University. I saw many of you last year. I've been here this is my second year now. But I'm here to talk to you specifically about checking for understanding, which is a really critical teaching strategy that we're going to be implementing this year. Next slide, please. Before we begin though, I would like you to turn to page 99 of your volunteer training manuals and respond to this question in 1 or 2 sentences. I'd like you to please write down your answer to the question. And while you're doing this, just remain silent. We'll discuss it later. Silently write down your answer to this question in 1 or 2 sentences and look up at me when you're finished. The question is, the educator's voice is the most important voice in the room. Do you agree or disagree? And tell me why. I hear voices already. This should be like we have most eyes. So, tell me. I would like you to raise your hand if you think that the educator's voice is the most important voice in the room. Go ahead and raise your hand. I see a couple. Hands down. Now I'd like you to raise your hand if you think that this is incorrect, that the educator's voice is not the most important voice in the classroom. Alright, so we've got a couple different perspectives here. Can some of you agree with this statement? I think you in the green sweater, what's your name?
Steph.
Steph. Why do you think that this statement's true? Why do you agree with it?
Well, I think that the educator is the one conveying the information, so of course their voice isn't the only important voice, but they are the one with the knowledge and information.
Okay, so kind of the purveyor of wisdom, of course not the only important voice, but probably the most.
Yeah.
Alright. There are a ton of hands for why this is untrue. Can somebody please tell me why they think that this statement's not true? What's your name?
I think the educator is supposed to be facilitating a conversation that the students can then have, so the most important voice I think would be more the students, and like hearing what they have to say and what they can contribute to whatever conversation they're having.
Okay, so I heard the keyword facilitating conversation in there. And what was your name?
Melissa?
Thanks, Melissa. Any other ideas? Why is this statement untrue? Your name?
Izzy.
Izzy.
In addition to what Melissa said, just the idea that even if there is some misunderstanding, you need to hear that in order to clear it up. So voicing that is like equally important.
Absolutely. So trying to figure out what the students know so that you can make sure that they're getting the right information. I love that you said that. Can we move to the next slide? Why do you do PHE? I'd like you to take 30 seconds to think to yourself, why do you do PHE? I'm going to call on a couple of you randomly. So just tell me why you decided to do PHE.
Melinda.
Melinda, why did you choose to do PHE?
So that I could teach kids health education because I didn't get that as a high schooler, and it's kind of important to learn this stuff.
Okay, so to teach important information that you didn't receive yourself. Alright? Somebody from the back. Elliot, why did you choose to do PHE?
I thought that the reward and students, not only one-on-one, but within the classroom setting, would be really rewarding.
Okay, so it's a rewarding activity. What else? What's your name?
Jasmine.
Jasmine, why did you choose to do PHE?
My family has never really been the type of family to talk about these things, and I learned through a program at my school, so I also wanted to do the same thing just because it's very important to know these things.
Okay, so replicating a valuable experience that you had. Awesome. So for all of these, I heard that, it's rewarding. We want to make sure teens learn. One of my favorite phrases that I learned when I was learning to become a teacher. Backstory, I did teach for America in Chicago for 2 years, so I've been in the classroom, and during my teacher training, one of my mentors always said this for me. Can I have a volunteer to read this statement nice and loudly? Your name?
Avery.
Avery.
If no one is learning, then no one is teaching.
Exactly. This kind of harkens back to what Izzy was saying before. We need to make sure that students are actually getting what we're saying. They're actually absorbing what we're trying to tell them if we want to say that we're actually teaching. To go into the classroom and to just share information is great, but it's only by making sure that students are actually learning and students are actually absorbing the correct information and able to apply that information that we can say that we're truly teaching and ensuring that those students are getting what they need. We're going to talk about checks for understanding so that we can make sure that we're accomplishing that. And going through this conversation, we're going to be looking at 2 different methods. We're going to be, first of all, looking at flowing the class, and we're going to work on scripting some of those into our curricula. In addition, we're going to look at follow-up questions, which is another technique for polling the class. And we're going to make sure that we strip some of those into our curriculum as well. And we're going to follow that with just a little bit of practice so that we can go back and forth and try this. So, checking for understanding. What does it mean? Thinking about that quote that I just shared for you, and what you know about teaching, what is checking for understanding? Mm-hmm. Sam?
I believe it's making sure that every student in the classroom is retaining the information that you're giving them and is engaged in what they're doing.
Okay, so ensuring that they're retaining and engaged. Can you tell me what do you mean by retaining information?
They're like absorbing.
Okay, so absorbing, so not just being able to repeat a fact, but also making sure that they're able to really own that information and absorb it. I like that term. All right. So we're going to be looking at a couple of different ways to do this. The first one is called polling the class. So polling the class, can I have somebody read for me what that is? In the red sweater, what's your name?
Sylvia,
Sylvia.
polling the class is when you engage every student in the class with a simple question.
Yeah.
Raise your hand if fist to five, Pandora wall, sit or stand.
Sorry, got excited. So polling the class. Did anybody catch when I did this earlier? Anybody point it out?
Just raise our hand.
I heard somebody start. What's your name?
Strand, like
Strand.
when you did the, look at me when you're done with the activity.
Okay, that's a good one. Yeah, that wasn't even the one I was going for. There you go. Another example when we did checking for understanding. Your name?
Miranda, you asked us to raise our hand if we agreed or disagreed with the statement.
Exactly, yeah. Raise your hand if you agree, put your hand down. Raise your hand if you disagree, put your hand down. There's lots of different ways to do these. For example, point to the window if you think that it's answer A, point to the wall if you think it's answer B. We have sit or stand, so stand up if you think that Alex made the right decision, stay seated if you think that Alex made the incorrect decision. There's a lot of different ways that we can do these. Fist to five is also a personal favorite. It's when you ask students if they understand and to show you how well they feel equipped that they can go ahead and enact this skill, or how well they think that they own this information so that they're ready to go on. Saying that, 0 if you don't understand at all 5 fingers if you understand really well, somewhere in the middle if you don't understand so much. So you get a really good read of the classroom. Why do we use polling in class? Can somebody please read for me that first bullet point? In the teal, what's your name?
I'm Jeff.
Jeff.
Engage the entire class in a simple, low-stakes question.
Thanks. What do you think we mean by simple and low stakes? In the plaid, what's your name?
Madeline, it's not necessarily going to make the majority of the class uncomfortable.
Yeah, so not making the class uncomfortable. So thinking about questions that you don't think the class would mind shouting out and letting everyone know their answer to. So something maybe about their own personal history or their thoughts on a really difficult question might not be appropriate for a very public raise your hand if you associate with this. Whereas a simple yes/no answer kind of showing understanding of some of the curriculum might be a little bit more effective. Second bullet point. Your name in the glasses?
Leilani.
Sorry, you're both in the glasses. In the red scarf, what's your name?
Leilani.
Leilani.
Assess the entire class on their understanding.
Exactly. Why do you think that this bullet point is important? Your name?
Nora, you're not just engaging with people who choose to volunteer. Everyone in the class participates. They either say yes or no.
Okay. So you're getting a good view of everyone in the class, not simply those 3 overachievers who are raising their hand for every question. Why else might this be important? Clara, why do you think this might be important?
So that you know whether or not to move on to the next topic or
Yeah, I really like that you pointed that out. So you're able to use that information to enhance your teaching, to really educate yourself and figure out where to go from there. Do I need to rehash this information, go over it again, and teach it in a different way? Or do these students already own it? I can skip the end of this activity and move right on to the next thing. In addition, it's helpful because it's really efficient. You can get answers from the entire class, and you can get input from the entire class in a really quick check for understanding by polling the class. Whereas if you were to ask every single question, or excuse me, every single student a question, it might be a lot more difficult to do so. Clara already pointed out to determine if our instruction is effective. going back to if nobody's learning, then nobody's teaching. We need to make sure that students are actually understanding what we're saying. And also to figure out if we're ready to move on. If we move on, will they understand? Do they have the foundational knowledge to keep going? So when to use it? Can somebody please read off for me when to use check for understanding or by polling the class? You in the glasses, what's your name?
Audrey.
Audrey, thanks.
Yes, if checking for basic agreement, checking for comfort with the material, basic binary.
Yeah, what do you mean by basic binary? Your name?
Natasha.
Natasha.
A yes or no question.
A yes or no with A or B, one or the other. It's hard to get an answer when there's 26 options with simply a raised hand or a window to the wall. You just don't have that many choices. When are these not appropriate? Somebody raise your hand to read. Your name?
Ben.
Ben.
It's not appropriate if you're asking sensitive questions, asking questions that are too hard to understand, and asking open-ended questions.
Yeah, so again, we want to make sure that they're simple, low-stakes questions. So something that a student wouldn't be uncomfortable raising their hand to answer. And also not open-ended questions. Again, we're looking at simple binaries. You can't explain a complicated answer by raising your hand or keeping it down. So some examples. Some examples of when we can use polling the class effectively. Can I have somebody read for me example number 1? How about a sophomore?
Second year.
Second years. Your name?
Namrata.
Namrata.
Example 1. Show me a thumbs up if you agree with Erica's response to my question, or show me a thumbs down if you think she missed something.
Alright. So show me a thumbs up if you think that that would be effective in the classroom. Show me a thumbs down if you think it'd be ineffective. And show me a thumb somewhere in the middle if you're not sure what I'm talking about. Alright, I see some thumbs up. I see some jocular thumbs to the side with laughter included. So this is a great way to check to make sure that students are ready to go on and they're kind of catching what you're throwing out there. A lot of times you'll see a group of students who have a very confused look on their face, and that can be either because they don't understand the content or because you're saying something in a weird way or you just look funny. So it can be helpful to use a simple check for understanding like thumbs up, thumbs down to see if they're pretty much getting what you're saying. Example number 2, somebody, a third year? Is that how you say it? Third year. What's your name?
Amelia,
Amelia.
if you think the person in the scenario should carry out this decision to drink, point to the ceiling. If you think they should not, point to the ground.
Alright, so kind of a twist on the window to the wall, floor to ceiling. So point up if you, I don't remember what this one says, if you think that they should carry out the decision, or point down if you think that they should not. What do you think an advantage to this one is, as opposed to just hands up, hands down? Your name?
Kelly.
Kelly.
It's engaging everyone, so if someone doesn't raise their hand, like you're not sure if they're just not participating. This way, someone's actually like stating a viewpoint, definitely.
Yeah, I love that you pointed that out. There's no opt-out. So there's no room for a student to just not raise their hand at all and just be like, I don't care. It forces every student to engage so you can make sure that you're getting feedback from every student. So even that quiet student in the back who seems really unsure if they're able to answer, you know if they're telling you what they're thinking or not, and you're able to get information from them. You don't have to wonder if they're not raising their hand because they disagree, or if they're not raising their hand just because they're tired and don't want to raise their hand. And then for checking comfort with material, that's the other bucket of helpful ways to poll in the class. Can somebody please read for me that example? A fourth year. Your name?
Megan.
Megan.
Using fists to five fingers meaning you totally got this, and no fingers meaning you don't get it at all. How ready are you to move on?
Yeah. So fist to 5, show me one finger if you think, oh, I don't know at all. 5 fingers if you're like, yeah, I got this. Somewhere in the middle of that. Helpful example, helpful tip for this might be to model. I've gotten some less pleasant one fingers if I didn't set this up correctly. So maybe say, give me your pointer finger if you're feeling very uncomfortable, and more fingers if you're feeling a little bit more uncomfortable. Just a tip from my experience. So some different examples of ways to poll the class. When we're giving poll the class, it's important that we set it up correctly and be careful with facilitation. As with any student activity, it's important that we're giving the students exactly what they need to participate effectively so that we're setting them up for success. So we gotta make sure that we're giving what to do directions. So exactly what Michael walked us through earlier, give those really effective instructions covering everything sequentially, specifically, and providing what to do afterward to be sure that our students know exactly how to participate effectively. Again, we're gonna ask a simple low-stakes question, and we're going to use that information to really educate us and to think about how we're going to move on from that if we've taught effectively and if our students are ready to move on. So we're going to look at an example now. During decision making, 2 students are asked to write questions that they have about sex on little pieces of paper, and the educators look through those and answer those questions as a way to dispel some myths about sex. Or excuse me, about drugs. About sex. Can somebody please read what one student wrote for me? Your name?
Kendall,
Kendall.
I heard that you can't get pregnant the first time you have sex. Is that true?
I would like you to point to the window if you think that this is a good place for polling the class, and I'd like you to point to the wall if you think that no, this is not a good place to poll the class. If you think it's an effective place, to the window. If you think it's ineffective, to the wall. You can sing the song in your head if you want to. Alright, so it looks like most of us are saying, we're split half and half. Can somebody who is pointing to the wall tell me why they think that no, this is not a good place for polling the class? In the beige sweater, what's your name? Olamide?
Olamide, yeah.
Olamide.
It's just like, I don't know, I feel like there's no room for like opinion. Like their opinion doesn't matter. Like this is you know what I mean?
Alright. So can you explain what you mean? Just so I can check.
I don't know, I just feel like asking the class like how many of them think that's true would be like a waste of time and confuse people. Like the fact of the matter is, like, yeah, you know, and tell them that and move on.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that this isn't an opinion question, so we're not really going to fuel discussion. It's more just a simple yes or no. We don't want to risk confusing students. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Thank you. Who thinks that this might be effective for polling the class? Your name?
Steph.
Steph.
Yeah, so sometimes a lot of the same myths circulate throughout different schools. Like for example, I think last year, 2 years ago, there was a myth that like a good way to test for STIs was to like insert earwax into a girl's vagina to see if it burned, and we heard this in multiple schools. So I think like dispelling the myths all at once, like to make sure that everybody knows that this isn't true, like even if they're not paying attention, making sure that everyone's engaged can be effective.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from you is maybe not necessarily knowing if they think it's true or not, but trying to get them interested so that you can make sure that everyone's hearing you and learning. Okay.
Nora.
Nora.
I think this is a great place to pull the class, and I wanted to say this about the Erica example. I didn't really like that as an example to pull the class because if I were Erica, I would feel embarrassed if everyone like thumbs down they disagreed with me. In this activity, it's an anonymous slip of paper. I would probably emphasize before I ask the question that a lot of students have this question, and so that way students often feel embarrassed asking a question that might seem obvious, and so that way they would see that a lot of people might not know the answer to this question by pulling the whole class.
So going back to the idea of low stakes versus high stakes, it's important to definitely read the classroom and read the read kind of the background of the workshop. If this is an anonymous question, it's going to be a little easier to make sure that the question that you're asking is low stakes and not going to embarrass everyone. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, it also a lot of the times depends on the situation on the educator, because there's a lot of times last year during Myths and Truths for rape and sexual assault where I would start teaching and ask whether some people thought a myth was true or whether it was false, and then people would get confused. Maybe I didn't handle it as well as I could. People would get confused whether it was actually true or false, because I was validating maybe the people who said it was true as much as I was validating people who said they were false by giving them like an equal kind of yes, thank you for sharing.
Okay, so definitely thinking back to the positive narration there, but also making sure that we're not confusing students with having different opinions circulating around at that poll class. And what was your name?
Anya.
Anya, thank you. So this may be a good place for polling the class, and it may not. I hate to not give you that much closure. I would probably do the polling class for this. I think it's an effective way to figure out how many of the students really think that this is true. If every student in the class think that this is true, that you can't get pregnant the first time you have sex, that would tell me as an educator that I should spend more time on this, and I should really focus on making sure that every student recognizes that this is untrue. Whereas if only one student raised their hand and everyone else is like, no, that's obviously not true, we know that's false, then you could probably talk about it very quickly and move on from there. So there's different ways that you can use the information, and different ways that you can also structure the poll class to make sure that you are doing that effectively. Again, just make sure that the classroom environment that you're in is a good one for polling the class, and that you can, you can ensure that the students won't be too embarrassed by singling out a single student, and also that you're going to be able to use that data, because there's no point in doing a check for understanding if you're not going to be able to use what you're getting. So again, for polling the class, we're going to give what to do directions, then we're going to ask a simple question. We're going to use the information to shape our instruction. We're going to follow up by telling students to sit back down, put their hands down, whatever you do. If you actually go back one slide. Can I have a brave volunteer to show me a poll the class? How would you facilitate polling the class if you got this in the workshop? Bonus points for whoever's willing. Ben, was it?
Yeah.
Ben, thank you. Can you stand up for us?
I'd love to.
All right. So Ben is now teaching the DM2 workshop, and he's going to take us through a poll the class, assuming that we just saw this as one of the myths or truths that students are asking about.
All right, so there's a question here, and I quote, "I heard that you can't get pregnant the first time you have sex." I would like to see thumbs up from people if you think it's true, thumbs down if you think it's not true, and thumbs in the middle if you have absolutely no idea. So if everyone could raise their hands, give me a thumbs up, down, or middle. I see a lot of hands. Excellent. Continue, keep going. Like we stopped.
We're good, we're good. All right, let's do a fist of five. Shelby, do you think that Ben nailed that with 5 fingers, or do you think that Ben could have used some improvement with fewer? Wow, Ben, I'm impressed. So mostly 4 or 5 fingers. What did Ben do really well with his example of polling the class? Strand?
Yeah. This is kind of like related to a different section, but he used like the acknowledgement technique. He's like, I see a lot of hands, and like that made us know that like what we were doing was good.
Exactly, yeah. Important reminder that none of these trainings that you're getting today exist in a silo. We should be using them all together to make sure that all of our instruction is really effective. What else did Ben do really well? Your name?
Greg?
Greg.
He offered a separate option for students who had no idea, which is an important thing that you need to know.
So it was clear. Do this if you think that's true. If you think it's untrue, if you're not sure. Definitely. What else did Ben do well? I forget your name. I'm sorry.
Avery.
Avery.
He looked around to see who responded and what the responses were.
Yeah, you gotta actually look to see what the data is if you're going to do this. So he looked around to figure out what he was seeing. One other thing that I liked about what Ben did was that he modeled for us. So instead of just saying put your thumbs up if you think that that's true, put your thumbs down if not, he actually showed us put your thumbs up, put your thumbs down. That way it's accessible to a lot more learners. Those visual learners and those learners who are struggling with English will be more able to participate because they got the multiple different ways of getting that information. Any areas that you think Ben could have improved upon? Your name and back?
Adrian?
Adrian.
One thing that I think is possibly inherently a little bit confusing about this one is it's a negative statement and then asking if it's true or false. And I can see a student being confused about whether thumbs down means you can't get pregnant the first time you have sex, like you're saying no, like that can happen, or whether thumbs down means it's false and you can. So like I feel like if you had said like if you had said specifically like thumbs up if you think it's true that you can't get pregnant the first time you have sex, thumbs down if you think it's false and you can't get pregnant.
Yeah, I think it's more confusing to say true and false. I would just say thumbs up if you think you can, thumbs down if you think you can.
Okay, so maybe just make sure that the wording is really effective. Ben quoted this, which is great. Sometimes it might be more effective to not necessarily quote it, but try to word the saying so that there's a very clear true or false, and then students are understanding what they're saying, because that can be confusing for anyone. Definitely. All right, thank you, Ben. Round of applause for Ben. Now that we've looked through how to poll the class, we're going to take a couple minutes to try to write these into our curriculum. So you're each teaching 2 workshops. Some of you are also teaching R1, so that would be 3. I would like you to work with the person to the right or left of you and figure out exactly where you can put poll the class into the curriculum. For many of you, there is a recommendation in the gray sidebar to include polling the class. If that's the case, I'd like you to actually script in the directions that you should use to make sure that the polling the class is really effective, just like that. Hold up before you get started, please. You have 8 minutes to do this. By the time you finish, I would like you to have identified at least 3 places in each workshop to do polling the class, and also to start writing in directions once you've identified those places. 8 minutes to get this. Go ahead. Your name in the red shirt, Becky?
I'd probably ask where they heard that myth.
Okay, so maybe instead of asking, do you know or not know, ask like some background information about it. What was your name?
Ryan.
Ryan, thank you. Any other thoughts? Lonnie?
I think if you sort of said like, oh, I don't really have an answer for that, you could ask them what about it is confusing, because there could just be more like a gray area that they can't answer like in a backwards way.
Yeah, so maybe where's your confusion? Like, what's giving you pause there? I think that's an excellent answer. Any other thoughts? Awesome. Any other questions? One question that I get a lot is, what if one person gives me a thumbs down and everyone else gives me a thumbs up? Basically meaning, what if there's only one person in the class that doesn't understand and everyone else does? What do you think your action should be from there? Your name?
I'm Madison.
Madison.
I have always made sure that everyone understands. Like, take the time to teach that kid what they're not understanding.
Okay. How would you do that? Like, would you go over with the whole class?
Yeah, I probably. I don't want to single it out and like feel bad for like.
So there's one school of thought that's like, maybe if one person doesn't understand, other people probably don't understand. Maybe I should teach everyone.
I think it's important to like make sure everyone is on the same page. And make sure, even if it's just one person, it's important to teach that one person the one thing.
Yeah. Any other strategies to reach that one student?
Jasmine.
Jasmine.
I wouldn't want to ask a follow-up question amongst everyone because it would really single them out. But afterwards, like maybe while they're doing an activity, during some downtime, like talk to that student and then make sure that they understand.
Mm-hmm. Other thoughts? Is it Jeff?
I might ask one of the students who said they could understand to explain it.
Okay, so ask a student to say it in their own words.
Yeah.
Awesome technique. Izzy, did you have something?
That was what I was saying.
Okay, Izzy was going to say that as well. Nora?
If there's a myth that most people knew was false, but 1 or 2 people thought was true, I would probably say that in a lot of classrooms I've taught at, a lot of people thought that this myth was true, and then go ahead and explain it as though most of the class did not already know it was false.
Yeah. Definitely. So oftentimes it's helpful to go through the entire class, but it's important to read the class. If you're short on time, you might decide that it's more important to get through the entire workshop and not go back at the entire class to that one student. Also remember that you can reteach things to individual students. So maybe get the rest of the class started on the next activity and go over to that one student who gave a thumbs down and check in with them to go over it one more time. Also remember that you have 2 educators. So there's 2 people in the classroom. That's a huge asset to you. So when one person's doing a poll of the class, the other person should keep an eye out and maybe say, like, okay, I got this one. Go check in with that one student who's a little bit misunderstanding so that the other educator can move on with the rest of the class. So there's a lot of different strategies to go through. It's really dependent on the individual classroom and the context of the question that you asked. But make sure that you're thinking a lot about how you can make sure that this class is, first of all, moving efficiently, but also reaching every single student and making sure that every student is learning, like Madison said, so is so important. I'd love to know how you feel about this, but first I want to know that you actually know what these things are. So, what is a poll to class? Can somebody give me a brief overview of what a poll to class is? And yes, what's poll to class? Green?
Victoria?
Victoria.
It's just when you ask like a simple yes or no question and ask the class to either like raise your hand or point to the window or the wall just to see how the class can respond.
Great. When would you use this?
And like with like a simple question or something that's not like really controversial or like might be too personal.
Right, so simple low stakes question. Definitely, and they're great because they give you information from the entire classroom in one really quick activity. And what are follow-up questions? Your name?
Spencer.
Spencer.
It's like a question that they give to the student in response to the answer that they've given.
So an additional question based on input that you've gotten from the students. And Spencer, what are those meant to accomplish?
So it's to just make them think deeper, and sort of like reflect on the answer that they've given.
Think deeper, also clarify responses. Yeah. All right, in Fist of 5, how comfortable do you feel implementing both of these methods in the classroom? 5 fingers if you feel like, yeah, I got this. 0 if you say, I have no idea what was going on this past hour and 15 minutes. And somewhere in the middle if you're somewhere in the middle. All right, mostly 4s or 5s. So you can see some raising the roof, which I love to see. All right, great. Now please grab your exit slip, that obnoxious orange piece of paper. And fill that out for the Check for Understanding training. So notice that this is the second to last one. Please make sure that in addition to filling out the numbers, you're also providing qualitative data. So share your thoughts and comments on the training. Noah, can you find your seat, please? All right. Now, point to the window if you're able to effectively find some places that you can incorporate follow-up questions into your workshop. And point to the wall if you have no freaking idea what you're doing. Nimrod, I saw that switch up. No, I'm just kidding. All right, excellent. Looks like most of you are able to find some place to work in your curriculum. Now, we're going to take a little bit of time for practice. I know you're tired and I know you want to get out of here. Practicing these skills is really critical to make sure that we're owning them so that when we get to the classroom, we can facilitate them effectively. So we're going to take about 10 minutes. 10 minutes. And we're going to use those 10 minutes to practice polling the class and asking follow-up questions. So I'd like you to work together in pairs. And the first person in the pair will ask a poll of class, framing it however you need to by teaching just a couple moments of your workshop. The other person in the group should then respond to that poll of class, which whatever gesture they've chosen. And then from there, the educator should ask some follow-up questions to try to dig a little bit deeper. Each of you should try this twice before switching off and going to the next person in the group. Again, you're going to be working in pairs. You have 10 minutes, so each of you should be facilitating for about 5 minutes. Are there any questions about what we're doing? As we're doing this, please stay in the room and make sure that you're using just low-level voices to make sure that everyone's able to hear. 10 minutes, go ahead. Attention back up front in 3, 2, 1. Can we get our next slide, please? Maybe? Nope. All right. So when we're asking follow-up questions, we're obviously getting a lot more information. So instead of doing a poll to class where you visually see what students are saying, with follow-up classes, we have to actually listen to what they're saying and process what they're saying. That sounds pretty simple, but it can actually be kind of difficult to focus on the deep responses that students are providing you while still focusing on the rest of the class, making sure that you're not tripping, keeping an eye on the clock, checking on that student in the back who's misbehaving. So we need to make sure that we're really showing that we're actively listening to students when they're giving us their responses. When we ask follow-up questions, we're asking more from students. We're asking them to go above and beyond and to give really deep and critically thought answers. So in doing so, we need to make sure that we're showing them that we are paying attention, that we're hearing what they're saying, and that we're using that to better the classroom. What are some ways that we can show a student that we're actively listening? Sam?
I had a teacher that used to always try to incorporate something said earlier in the class, something
and connect it to something that you can either teaching later or somebody, like a comment somebody would make later on. So I guess it's a way to show that you're listening and respecting your students.
Okay, so using what a student said to further the classroom discussion and drop it in later. Did you have something?
Yeah, also maybe just like paraphrasing what the student said, so that way they know that you heard them, understood them, and like then the class also gets feedback.
So paraphrasing what they said, making it short and sweet. Definitely. Your name again is?
Megan.
Megan.
Like what you just did, moving towards the person who's answering the question and making eye contact with them, paying attention to them.
Definitely. So changing your positioning in the classroom to face the student, maybe move to them, and also making eye contact, not awkwardly staring them down because that's creepy, but showing that you're listening by making that eye contact. And Andrea. Adrian. Oh, sorry.
If a student says something that's like wrong or that I feel like we need to correct, I always, before I do that, I ask them why they think that, because that way instead of just like shutting them down, I can kind of think.
So you can ask another question based on what they said to clarify. I like what you said there about before correcting a student or saying that they're wrong, to try to get further explanation and clarify. Follow-up questions are really helpful to make sure that you're understanding students correctly. If a student says something that they think is right, and that is actually right based on what they're thinking, and maybe they're not saying it effectively, you could really confuse a student by saying that it's wrong. I know that was confusing. So if a student's, what they're saying sounds incorrect, but what they think they're saying is actually the right answer, and you say that it's wrong, that can be really confusing. So for asking a student to clarify what they said, to say it in a different way or to rephrase, that can be really helpful to make sure that all of the students are being thoroughly heard out, and that you're actually getting what they're saying, or where their understanding is breaking down, and you can really effectively make sure that you're changing instruction to meet what they need. Any other ways that we can show students that we're listening? Clara? Using their names, definitely, so thank you, Clara. Avery?
Maybe just occasionally nodding when they speak.
Yeah, nodding. Those simple types of body language that you can use throughout regular conversation. Use those in the classroom too, just to show students that you're really getting what they're saying. So once you actually listen to what the students are saying, you can utilize what you might be able to utilize what we said. So we went a little bit further. So some helpful ways to think about checking for understanding are, I think we missed a slide in there, but that's okay. So when we're checking for understanding by asking follow-up questions, it's helpful to ask open-ended questions that allow the students to really build in their responses. Can anybody think of some examples of open-ended questions you can ask a student to help clarify, expand, or rephrase what they said before? That was kind of an abstract question. Ben, what do you think?
You could ask them, what do you think? How about that? You could also ask them, could you go a little further, or what do you mean by either that, or if you want to get more specific, what do you mean by such and such a phrase?
Okay, so what do you mean by that? What do you think? Can you go further with that? Are three that I heard? Definitely. Nimrata?
Yeah. Can you give me a specific example?
Yeah, asking for an example. What else? Come on, there's bajillions of them. Somebody who hasn't spoken to me yet before. Sorry, Kendall, I'm sure your answer is great. Well, somebody from these first two rows. What's another open-ended question that you can ask a student to help clarify their response, dig deeper, or get more information? Your name? Danielle.
Can you give an example? Like if they say something you're not sure, can you give an example?
So we just got that one. Can you give us another one? Maybe you need some time to think?
Yes.
All right. Any other thoughts? Your name?
Ask why they said something. Like ask why they said the answer.
Okay, and what was your name?
Henry.
Henry, thanks. So ask why they say an answer, definitely. So why you said an answer. Also, where did you get that from? Can you walk me through your process in getting that answer? Think about, like, if you're asking the answer to a math problem, it's not helpful for them to just say the wrong answer. It's helpful to know how they got there so you can break down their misunderstanding. We have an example. We can also ask somebody, can you explain what I just said in a different way? Noah mentioned that earlier, but making sure that students are hearing it from multiple different ways and in multiple different manners of speaking to make sure that everyone's kind of getting it in a different way. So the bottom line about when we ask these follow-up questions is we want them to be open-ended, and we want them to prompt the students to think more and share more. So the example that all of those students gave was that these follow-up questions are open-ended and that they don't provide any sort of opt-out. So it's not just a simple answer, yes or no. It really requires them to explain and give a lot more information so that you can understand what they're saying. Now we're going to do similar to what we did with polling the class, and it's going to be a little bit more challenging this time because we don't have an example of what the class conversation is like. Follow-up questions are very focused on what students are saying to you. And when we ask follow-up questions, we should be trying to better understand and also foster discussion in a really effective way. One great place for follow-up questions is after polling the class. So frequently you'll have students say, point to the window or to the wall for this answer. You'll see a student pointing to the window and you can ask that student, why do you think that? Can you explain your answer? So these certainly do not operate outside of each other. In fact, they operate really well together. But follow-up questions do not need to come immediately after polling the class. One other thing that I want to be clear about before we go ahead into our curriculum is that in addition to getting more information from your students, polling the class is follow-up questions are a really great way to foster discussion in your classroom. Going back to that original quote, we said that, or the quote said that the teacher's voice is the most important voice in the classroom. The vast majority of you disagreed with that because we want to hear from students, we want to know what they're thinking. Discussions are really great ways to hear from a lot of different students, to get a lot of different perspectives, and to make sure that your class is a really rich and engaging environment. So by asking these follow-up questions and bouncing the follow-up questions off of other people, it can be really helpful to help to foster that discussion and make sure that the classroom is a really helpful learning environment for everyone. So now I'd like you to turn back to your workshops in your curriculum and take about 5 minutes to locate places where it might be helpful to think about what sorts of follow-up questions you can ask your students. Raise your hand, tell me if you think that you know what a follow-up question is. What are they? Kendall, looks like you're not quite sure.
A question that furthers the discourse on the original.
Can you say that a little bit louder?
So, it's like, something that takes it a little bit further, right? Like, I'll ask you, hey, you like dogs? And you might be like, yeah. And I'll be like, what kind?
Okay, so taking a little bit further, I usually call that digging a little bit deeper, try to get a little bit more information out. Exactly, what else can follow-up questions do? Where should they be used? Your name?
Noah?
Noah.
They can be used to check for understanding by asking, can somebody repeat that back to me or rephrase that for me?
Okay, so they can be used as a check for understanding by repeating a definition or asking somebody maybe to rephrase something that was a little bit confusing. Definitely. Can we move on to the next slide? So, can somebody read that for me? Right?
Yes. Follow-up questions are questions that an educator asks to a student in response to an answer that they've given. Follow-up questions are meant to push the student to dig deeper, clarify their response, and think critically.
Exactly. So as Kendall said, to go a little bit deeper, to get more information, Noah recognized to clarify the response, to maybe repeat something in a different way, and then also to think critically. So asking a deeper question that it forces a student to explain their answer, go through their reasoning, or really make sure that what they're saying is clear and complete. So on page, I believe it's still 99 in your volunteer training manual, please just jot down a brief definition of what's up there. It does not have to be verbatim, but just something that you can refer back to when you're teaching your curriculum and trying to figure out, how can I follow up to these questions? Take about 15 seconds.